Welcome to the Irish NFL show and welcome to our Week 3 Talking Points show in partnership with Buskers on the Ball. We'll get to the Dolphins' historic offensive efforts a little bit later. We'll talk about that crazy game in Minnesota too, where it turns out that the Vikings curse is somehow even stronger than the Chargers curse. But let's start with the Cardinals, who are pulling off what looks like one of the worst tank jobs in history because, Colm, the Cardinals are actually good. They turned over the Dallas Cowboys, and in some style too. That was not one that any of us expected going into the weekend. And I'm pretty sure there weren't too many people picking the Cardinals, even in the desert where the Vegas oddsmakers live. Not in the Arizona desert did they anticipate that the Cowboys would meet their comeuppance in such interesting fashion.
Yeah, Connor, Taylor Swift has the 2017 song, "This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things." And this is why the Cowboys can't have nice things, because this is what happens, right? They get all the hype and then ultimately it all falls apart. And this wasn't a complete fluke by the Cardinals. Okay, granted, the Cowboys were missing players on the offensive line, but ultimately they failed to score points in the red zone, and the Cardinals took care of business. And if you didn't see the TikTok of the QB enjoying life over Micah Parsons. Now, it was all in good fun, in fairness. Look, and I wonder if the Cardinals themselves made a mistake and underestimated in terms of moving off of Colt McCoy, because Colt McCoy, if you really wanted to tank, that might have been the safer play. They now have a QB who is playing for his NFL career. If Joshua Dobbs has a good year, I mean, he could earn like potential, well, maybe a starter, but certainly a backup, right? And now ultimately being a backup in the league is 10 million a year for the next 10 years. Like, this is 100 million on the line, and there's plenty of other players as well. They're well coached. They negated the Cowboys, I suppose, pass rush. They got the ball out super quick, and they were just really smart about how they approached this. For the Cowboys, this feels like, and I said it on the show on Thursday, I said they surely won't be like the Denver game from a few years ago, where they were caught napping and they underestimated the opponent, but it was the exact same. So it would appear that no matter who the Cowboys have as their head coach, ultimately the same problems materialize again and again and again. And the Cowboys are going to go to the playoffs, but unless something fundamentally changes, it's difficult to see them getting back to the championship game.
Brian, we'll get to the Cowboys in a little bit more detail, but let no one take the focus away from Arizona and what they've done. And I suppose it goes to show how the convenient little narratives that sometimes come together in the off-season and in the preseason don't necessarily manifest themselves. And this is why we watch the games. This is why we play the games. Jonathan Gannon was something of a joke. He was meme-worthy because of the kind of hyper-energetic display he put in when he first arrived in Arizona, and people were kind of poking fun at him. There were question marks over him based on that obviously underwhelming Eagles' effort in the Super Bowl on defense, where they basically got pantsed by Andy Reid, victimized by the same play twice. A lot of fingers pointed at him. But he comes into this season and he has the Cardinals ready to go with an unproven Joshua Dobbs, who was only starting, only winning for the first time in the game last week. And they look really good. They look really well coached. A lot of smart play on offense, where they were kind of smashing the Cowboys up with James Conner and then suddenly fake them out and send Rondale Moore through the middle, and he scampers for a touchdown. Dobbs looks really confident. He stepped Micah Parsons early on and ran for 43 yards himself before getting pushed out. Everything's coming together nicely for them.
Yeah, I'd like to commend the offensive coordinator, Drew Petzing, going into the season. Some Cardinals fans were also giving him a hard time, as well as obviously people have been down on the team. 400 yards total offense. I think Dobbs only had something like 4 incomplete passes throughout the course of the whole game. They scored on the first 5 drives, whether it was field goals or touchdowns. I mean, it's brilliant. Like we did say last week that we felt, okay, this one's going to be really above their weight battle in terms of playing the Cowboys, but they have started both games really well, and the Cowboys have to be kind of wary of that if they come out with a fast start. And they caught them napping. They really did. But the drive for me towards the end of the game, when despite the fact that the the Cowboys went 1-5 in the red zone. You know, that's just not good enough. You know, and you have 2 red zone drives where you don't score at all. But that particular drive at the end,
if only they had Zeke, they could have punched it in with Zeke.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. We talked about Pollard, and Pollard's going to step in and be the number 1 back. But Pollard in that game last weekend didn't do a lot. He was stifled on a lot of players. But let's not take it away from the Cardinals. Like, this Cardinals team have played for the head coach, and we joke about they're not tanking in the right way. They don't fully understand. But Colin was right. He's called it out last week. These guys are playing for their careers as opposed to playing for the organization as much as that. And it's great. And you're right with Dobbs. Like, that particular, he's the one that set the ground running in terms of that 47-yard rush early on in the game. As you said, he sidestepped Parsons, and straight away they were on the front foot, and it continued. And they had them kind of napping throughout the course of the game. The Rondale Moore touchdown again was one that you just didn't see coming either. And the Cowboys, Colin was right, he called it again. They had 107 yards of penalties on the game, 13 flags. This is Cowboy stuff we see where they just get away from what they do right. And when they get caught up in these type of games and they're giving away yards on penalties, it only leads to one thing. And people are, questioning Dak again, because when Dak puts himself in a position to get it done, he doesn't get it done often that when it comes to these type of games where they're there to be won and he doesn't get over the line.
No, for all that we doubt the Cowboys, Colin, because of the all sizzle and no stake tag that's attached to them for the last 20 years, this one's quite concerning. And I know you don't want to overweight on one defeat, but normally the Cowboys are flat track bullies. These are the sort of teams that they run over in the regular season before somebody actually stands up to them and knocks them flat in their ass in the playoffs. You don't expect the Cowboys to show up with such a poor effort. As Brian mentioned, 9 penalties for 106, 107 yards. These are self-inflicted wounds. That poor performance in the red zone, it's just not good enough. It's not what you expect from a team that was able to put 40 on the Giants without conceding a point a couple of weeks ago. They just looked complacent. They looked off the boil.
Yeah, but that's almost what I do expect from the Cowboys, because time has shown us that the Cowboys play well, and they opened the season and like they were incredible, right, in that opening, particularly the defense. But everything came so easy to them in those first 2 games, and now they have to regroup quickly, because ultimately the Patriots come into Jerry's world, and then they go on the road against the 49ers. So they have a couple of big games coming up. They need to right themselves. I think they'll be fine in the regular season. I do. I think and they will get the players back on the line. I think they were a bigger issue ultimately than, say, Zeke. But I think when push comes to shove in the playoffs, like, are they going to be able to, make those trips to the red zone count when they go up against, again, the really top defenses? And they are coached by Mike McCarthy. This is the concern. But they'll be fine. I mean, Dallas are going to probably win 12 regular season games, and they could even surprise the 49ers. They're that sort of team, but then they'll go out the next week and lay an egg against the Chargers.
12 wins. Sorry, 12 wins for the Cowboys. Okay, we're nearly running the table type of scenarios here, given those 12 wins. Okay, let's see.
Well, Brian, let's talk about a team that's well on pace for 12 wins and certainly for records in terms of offensive production. The Dolphins put up 720 plus yards of total offense at the weekend, an NFL record. Only the 70 points. They didn't quite get the NFL record, but it's the first time a team's put up 70 points since the 1960s. We've said it over and over again about the Dolphins. Speed kills. They are unbelievably fast in all departments. One stat here that caught my eye after the weekend: the 5 fastest speeds recorded by NFL players this season, all by Dolphins. 3 by Tyreek Hill, 1 by Raheem Mostert, and 1 by Devon Achane, the A-Train that we saw over the weekend, who was just electric and so fast. I feel sorry for track and field athletes across the US now, for sprinters. They're hassled enough by NFL scouts, but everybody at 100-meter and 200-meter race for the next 2, 3, 4 years is going to be harangued by NFL scouts, wondering can they catch a ball or run with the ball, because the Dolphins proved that if you have guys that can run that fast and can play football, there's not much you can do to stop you, especially when you got Mike McDaniel drawing up the plays.
The Broncos could have stopped them if they had been cover 3 in the second half and let them play in front of them and take away the deep threat and let them use the clock. And don't find yourself in a position where you're on the wrong end of a team trying to set an NFL record. And he did him a solid, didn't he? That's what the people are suggesting. Sean Payton was done a solid by the Dolphins not kicking the field goal at the end. I mean, like if that was Bill Belichick, he would have kicked the field goal and set the record. He wouldn't be worrying about the other side of the fence. But look, all joking aside, I think whatever team played, I genuinely think whatever team played the Dolphins last weekend would have got a roast. And they were not just form. It's lights out stuff, but I mean the numbers are all 1 yards total offense, and I think even in the rushing department was over 300. I think 320 odd. You've got 2 running backs essentially running in, but they're not even running in touchdowns. They're quick kind of down and out passes in the red zone from 2. I thought the tackling by the Broncos defense, in particular the red zone on some of those touchdowns was very poor. But just a real test this weekend for the Dolphins. They go into Buffalo, and this game, has huge impact on the division. If they were to win this, there'd be 2 games ahead of the Bills. We'll see if they can be slowed down. But right now, they look like a juggernaut that can't be stopped. But we've seen this before early on in the NFL season. It doesn't always materialize come the NS.
Well, we saw last season for starters, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. They went into Baltimore, did something similar. I'd be interested to hear what Colum's thoughts are on the other side of the fence in terms of Broncos and what the
we've delayed it long enough, Colin. Brian's kindly suggesting the Dolphins would have done that to anyone last weekend, but the Broncos certainly didn't.
I'm doing columnists. I'm doing columnists. See, I'm doing columnists solid now.
Well, if we're to keep on the theme for the Dolphins, Taylor Swift has a song. Today was a fairy tale. Well, Sunday was a fairy tale for them. I disagree with Brian about the and about Mike McDaniel doing a solid. Again, I'll go. Taylor Swift has a song, "Better Than Revenge." That's what that was. Okay. There is, for anyone who isn't aware of it, check out, there is a Twitter account called QB Collective, and it is basically the Shanahan coaching tree, the Mike Shanahan coaching tree. Kyle Shanahan, we know, has access to it. I don't think he actually tweets, but that Twitter account is basically the Mike Shanahan account. They, to say they dislike Sean Payton would be an absolute understatement. They took huge umbrage to his comments about Nathaniel Hackett during the summer, and they've taken shots at him ever since. The fact they didn't kick it was essentially what Fergie used to do to Wenger when he used to ruffle his hair and kind of pat him on the head, and after absolutely annihilating him. And the Vic Fangio piece probably played into that as well. I know Cameron Wolfe commented that in the Dolphins locker room, the feeling was that the Broncos essentially quit in the third quarter. Now, when you are quitting in the third quarter of week 3, that is quite something. But look, this is the chickens coming home to roost for the Broncos. Okay, this is years of ineptitude. And it gets covered over a lot in the league, right? Every team has local media, and some are more critical than others. Some can afford to be in a New York market. There's plenty to go around. The Philly market is a law unto itself. But in Denver, they tend to be very kind to the team, and they've ignored a lot of the failings. This is a bad team. It's a badly coached team, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and it's a badly run team. The roster is terribly constructed. Well, there's no explosiveness there on either side of the ball, and they brought Vance Joseph back just a few years on from him being an abject disaster as head coach. And how is anyone going to respect him? It's just not there. They can't really make any changes just because it's so fresh. But ultimately, I cannot see George Payton being in a job beyond this season. I cannot see Vance Joseph being in a job beyond this season. We'll get into the 2 bald men fighting over a comb on Thursday evening.
Do we have to?
This is deja vu, like the score was worse, and I mean you almost, the score was so bad that I think it has almost deflected from just what a rotten position this Broncos team are in, because it seemed like a Madden score. It's the type of thing you only ever saw, on a computer screen. It's like when Ronaldo and Messi first started doing those 60 goal a year seasons, and it was like you used to hear about Dixie Dean, and you could never imagine a player doing that. They suddenly started doing it, and now we have that in the NFL. I mean, I used to laugh at college teams kind of putting up those sorts of numbers, and here my team are on the receiving end of it. There's no easy solution to the Broncos for this. This is they need to basically tear it down. They've avoided rebuilding. They've cut corners. They've tried to take shortcuts, and ultimately they had their pants completely pulled down by Mike McDaniel and Vic Fangio, who were just magnificent at the weekend.
Brian?
Yeah, I was columnist referencing different quotes and different songs about that last particular play of not kicking the field goal. I remember a Giants game in the 80s where the Giants eased up on a team. They put 40 down on, and they asked him, "What did you say to the players?" And Bill Parcells said, "Stop beating the dog. The dog is dead." So I think we might have been looking at it, a poor puppy come the end of that game, all right. But
I thought, I completely agree with you, Colin. Like, I thought from McDaniel, that was the ultimate in mind games. Like, I could do this to you, but I'm going to take pity on you, because this is the thing that I know is going to annoy Sean Payton the most. The fact that I had the opportunity to do it, but I spared you just this one time. It's like the ultimate slight, and that's really going to stick in Payton's throat. I really enjoyed the press conference afterwards, by the way. Payton just looked as you'd expect him to look. Sweet, sweet revenge. We had, let's move on to some teams for whom the arrow was pointing up, and one of those certainly the Texans over the weekend, Brian, where, again, a coach that a lot of people expected a lot of big things of, D'Amico Ryans, absolutely looks to be the person that a lot of observers hoped and expected him to be. He has the Texans playing. We talked about them being a relatively talent-poor roster. Now suddenly Nico Collins is showing up. Tank Dell has a great connection with Stroud, who's settled in, hit stride right away. He doesn't look like a rookie quarterback, frankly, the way he's playing at the moment. And this was no fluke against the Jags over the weekend. They absolutely earned that win, and they're going to get more before the season is over.
I was annoyed with my convictions, Connor, because on the show last Thursday, I nearly went to the trouble of actually selecting the Texans. I said this game would be a lot closer than people may imagine. And as well as they played, the Jags also did themselves a disservice, in particular on special teams. They 2 field goals blocked. They tried to be too clever on that kickoff in the third quarter when they got back within 7 points, and Beck returns it for the touchdown. But that's not get away from a really strong Texans performance offensively in particular. We spoke about Tank Dell in the offseason. We spoke about the connections that these two guys could have. We said it could be something similar with the Coles, with Josh Downs and Richardson, and we're seeing it. 145 yards, an explosive touchdown. You're talking about taking the top off defenses. I know they went blitz heavy on that particular play, and he was wide open. But the connections there, you can see it's evolving as we go along week on week. And the previous week,
the 50-yard ball he caught to the one for when Damian Pierce finished it off, like Stroud just dropped that in a bucket, and he's triple covered there. Like, it has to be absolutely on the money, and it is, and it's a great catch too. Like, there's a real connection there. It's a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, so he's slightly gone under the radar. You're a second round pick, you're not going to be slightly under the radar, but Bryce Young got all the bear in mind, 2 or 3 weeks out from the draft, if you were to bleed speculation, the Panthers hadn't made up their mind. People were convinced it was CJ Stroud. Obviously, as time evolved, getting close to the draft, it was evident then they were going to Bryce Young. But you're going to have to wonder, because the Panthers right now, Bryce Young obviously is out injured. Me and Colin spoke about it in Buskers on Saturday at the podcast recording around rookies being out and rookies getting injured, and sometimes the second round pick ends up being the better. Sorry, the second pick in the draft ends up a little bit less pressure, has a better season. But right now, the Texans are certainly going in the right direction. You wouldn't be against the realms of possibility that they go and win this weekend either. It's a huge win, but the Jags always struggle. They always find ways to lose these games, again, in the division, in particular at home. It's not a daunting place to go, with all due respect to them. They've got 2 London games coming up. It's a big week for the Jags going up against the Falcons.
Yeah, they're bringing up the rear in that division now, Colin, which isn't what we expected of the Jags. We thought they, might struggle defensively, but that we'd still see that high-powered offense, which couldn't bail them out at the weekend.
Yeah, I suppose, again, I go back to week 3 of last year. And actually, this time last year, Connor, you and I were having a great time because the Bears had just won and the Broncos beat the 49ers. Remind me how their respective seasons ended. I think the Jags will, or I imagine the Jags will be okay. I think they're sputtering on offense, but it's drops and it's stupid things. Like Trevor Lawrence is playing quite well, and you're seeing ETN is actually making guys miss. I know. I think that it was Christian Kirk maybe that said that the change of scenery might be good, that they can kind of get out of their own way. I think they're a little bit feeling the pressure and the expectation. It's not something that they've had to necessarily deal with previously, and now they do, and it's taking a little bit of time for them to adjust to that. But I think for me, the concern would be around the lack of pass rush, because the Texans were missing so many, and you've covered CJ Stroud, who was excellent, but the Jags couldn't lay a glove on him. But also the secondary. The Texans confuse them in all sorts of ways. So the defense is what would worry me. The offense, I do think, will get going. But the defense has struggled. And I knew they wouldn't be good, but they've struggled even more than I expected.
Brian, the other coach or rookie, new head coach with a rookie quarterback surprising people is Shane Steichen at Indianapolis. Maybe it's not necessarily that he's surprising people, but rather the Colts so far have surprised people, and that they're 2-1, and they managed to get it done without Anthony Richardson at the weekend. Gardner Minshew stepped in and stepped out of the end zone at one point, pulling a Dan Orlovsky to incur a safety, but that wasn't enough to take the fun out of their evening. They ultimately went on thanks to 4 50-yard plus Matt Gay field goals, never been done before, and done in all places in front of Justin Tucker, who's normally the man with the long leg who seals the deal in overtime. Went the other way for Indy at the weekend. Two sides to this story, of course, as there always is. There's Indy playing well, but there's also maybe the Ravens sputtering after when we thought Lamar had the get-right game last week, and they lost that momentum pretty quickly.
Yeah, did we overhyped them after 2 games? We've all been guilty of doing that with teams. They certainly didn't look themselves. It reminded me in many ways of the Texans game in week 1. They never really got going offensively. It was the same last year. A lot of games last year against poorer teams. I recall the Broncos going in there last season. It took a long time for them to put away. I don't know what it is about their home games. They don't seem to find a way to put these teams away convincingly. And Lamar had the 2 touchdowns, but they didn't do a lot in the air. In fairness, they were missing a lot of players. And defensively, they weren't at the races. Like Zach Moss, the running back for the Colts, how many times did he slice them up? He sliced them up very early on in the game, and it was continued throughout the course of the game, which relieved the pressure on Gardner Minshew. I've had Ravens fans, a few friends who've been disappointed with the flag at the end. They felt it was pass interference. The Ravens, it was clearly held, with the hands. And another day, then they get that the Ravens win the game, and they're 3-0. But yeah, look, it's evident. Colin was rightly called it out. This head coach with the Colts. Sometimes, again, coaching matters. We spoke about it in the offseason. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a great set of players, but you have all the players understanding their jobs, understanding what's expected of them with a coaching staff. It can lead to wins and can put you in a position to go to the playoffs. It's a huge win for the Colts, who you have to say are going in the right direction despite the quarterback being out. I think the Ravens will just move on from this one and come again, but they've got a tough one against that 2-1 Browns that we all like.
I mean, Colin, we've referred to both the Broncos and the Bears looking poorly coached and just lost. But yet you talk about the Cardinals, you talk about the Texans, and now we're talking about the Colts. Teams that just look ready to play every week, whatever they come up against on both sides of the ball. They're putting it in and they're getting the results.
I'm going for this one. I got to go with Taylor's "The Moment I Knew," because Shane Steichen is a special coach. But for the Ravens, "Dancing with Our Hands Tied" from her 2017 album, the Ravens, like, their injury list is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. They are the most injured team in football, which they seem to have been for certainly 3 of the last 5 years anyway.
That's what you get for trying to win preseason games. The players before they even get to play football for real.
Potentially, but they had moments to win it, and the Colts and they rightly deserve their laurels. They hung tough despite some missteps and mishaps of their own, and the kicking game was fantastic. But the Ravens can point to, I think, a couple of reffing decisions, one at the end of regulation, one in overtime. They'll be okay. You have these results, but I thought Lamar overall looked really good, and they just had some kind of moments. Kenyon Drake with the fumble. Lamar fumbled as well, which was a really kind of strange fumble. I think that they'll be fine. Brian has pointed out that they'll just move on, and I think Harbaugh will move on. One team ever has been perfect in this league. You have to take your lumps sometimes, and I think that was just the case for the Ravens. But they'll begin to get guys back, and as they begin to get guys back, that will make all the difference.
A guy that the Saints will definitely want back is Derek Carr, who was injured in the game against the Packers, Brian. Let that not detract from the fact that Jordan Love led them to 18 unanswered points in the fourth quarter to dig themselves out of a 17-0 hole and get the win there in their home opener at Lambeau. Did Love make the leap in that week, do you think?
It's a strange game. The Saints looked so comfortable for large parts. It looked like it was over. We were obviously discussing the game and over the course of the 4 quarters, and like James Winston's more than capable of stepping in and winning that game for them. I was looking at stats. The Packers only held the ball for something in the region of 5 to 6 minutes of the 4th quarter. So it wasn't even like they had these long methodical drives and they eked out the win. They literally cut through them very quickly, and then went for the 2-point conversion and put themselves in a position to win. It's a strange one. I'm still kind of get my head around it because we were doing a preview for Thursday night's game, and Packers fans will be in the crest of a wave after that beauty comeback. And for Jordan Love in his first game, again, it's only builds the hype around him. But for me, it's one that the Saints will reflect on and wonder how they didn't win, despite the fact that Derek Carr was lost in the game. It obviously looks like he's gone for a period of time. It's just very strange. They were so dumb. You look at the stats of the game, first downs, you look at defensive numbers, it looks like the Saints have just all day long, and yet they somehow end up losing a very close game.
Colm, it is kind of hard to know what to make of the Packers, as Brian said. We saw them against the Falcons again. They're very efficient on offense, I guess is one way to put it. Love was I think passed for 151 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Falcons in a game, admittedly, that they lost when they coughed up an 11-point lead. They sliced and diced the Saints very quickly and efficiently when they needed to in the fourth quarter, and credit where credit's due there. We also should mention they're down some key players at the moment as well. They're down David Bakhtiari, down Aaron Jones, of course, which really affects the running game and probably contributes to their inability to milk the clock. And as Brian referred to earlier, they're down Elton Jenkins, they're down Jair Alexander, but they'll be very happy to be sitting at 2-1 with everything that's going around there. They probably feel like they're slightly playing with house money the way that one went at the weekend.
Yeah, I think ultimately for me, this let's get another Taylor Swift reference in, death by 1,000 cuts, because for the Saints, ultimately, the Packers just kept chipping away. And I think there are a number of things this is why we love the league, right? Because part of it is the Saints were so dominant, but what we saw the Dolphins do and what we saw the Chiefs do is rare, right? It's rare that teams get blown out. What tends to happen is you hang on in there, you get opportunities. Can you take advantage of those opportunities? Also, and this is where
it used to be, and we almost kind of gloss over it now. It used to be that if a team was down 3 scores, they were done. Like 17-0 was not a lead you came back from. Now pretty much every week somebody digs themselves out of a 2 or 3 score deficit.
And I think that's where good analytics comes into it, right? Because we're going to get to Brandon Staley, but LaFleur made the right decision in terms of the way in which the Packers operated at the end, right? And that's what you need is you need your coach who's going to make the right calls and go for it at the right moments and make the right calls in terms of going for it in the red zone, going for 2 points, etc. And that, I think, was one of the key factors ultimately for the Packers. Being at home was a huge factor as well, and the crowd kind of almost willing them, because the commentators had put it away. They were talking about the Packers losing the home opener, but ultimately they found a way. And yeah, you're right, Connor. The sheer number of people that they are missing. Has it been fantastic? No, but the opening 3 weeks, you're kind of allows you to take stock, and I'm sure there'll be some tweaks as we go through it. But given that they moved on from Aaron Rodgers and the injuries, yeah, I think they'll be very happy with where they are.
Brian, not necessarily so the Saints. Derek Carr now week to week after that diagnosis, sprained AC joint in his shoulder. Obviously, Jameis Winston, as you say, you could expect to deputise up to a certain level, but before and after, pictures look very different at the weekend. We'll talk about the Bengals later. You don't want Carr to be dinged and for that to be a lingering injury, because that could really derail things.
I think, unfortunately, that is going to be the case. Though we saw a couple of years ago with Baker Mayfield, and I know we saw Baker Mayfield probably slightly come back to what we expected last night on Monday Night Football. But I remember a couple of years ago, everybody had high expectations of that second year. The Browns with Baker Mayfield, he got a similar injury, and he never looked right for the rest of the season. Like, there's no way for me Derek Carr is going to be back playing 2 to 3 weeks' time. If he is, he's going to be playing suffering, I'd imagine. They might get away with it this weekend. They got a home game against the Bucs, which is always feisty. Let's be fair, Saints Bucs games are always difficult, but the Saints have always had a good run of it, in particular the regular season against the Bucs, not so much the playoffs a couple of years ago. But still think with Jameis Winston, I think the Saints at home this weekend would have more than enough. But I think it's going to be the Winston Roadshow for a period of time, and unless they rush Carr back, I don't see him back within 2 to 3 weeks, and he is, for me, he's playing injured.
Well, one interesting aspect of the Jameis Winston roadshow in New Orleans, of course, Colin, is that rules him out of the sweepstakes for the Jets. Not that there is officially a sweepstake, but you got to feel that the end is coming soon for Zach Wilson. He got the dreaded vote of confidence again from Robert Saleh at the weekend, but it's just pitiful watching this poor guy, even for his own sake, going out throwing the ball for the Jets. He looks haunted. I mean, he's gifted, cursed, depending on which way you look at it. Zach Wilson with an eternally young-looking face. He'll probably still look 14 when he's 46, but there's that wide-eyed look that he gives you where he looks completely overwhelmed, and it shows at virtually every passing down that the Jets have. It's killing the entire momentum in the building. They're at each other's throats on the sidelines. Something has to give quickly. What's the solution?
For this one, Connor, I couldn't decide between 3 Taylor Swift songs, and you kind of teed it up beautifully in the haunted look that he has, because the first song was the sad, beautiful, tragic, because I think that is ultimately a great summation of Zach Wilson, the QB. Watching him is just sad and tragic. Aesthetically, he's very pleasing, but and he throws the football and you go, oh my goodness. The others were Miss Americana and the Heartbreak Prince, and ultimately should have said no, which is what the Jets should have done, because the Zach Wilson stuff really began with the pro day and the incredible arm strength that he showed, where he rolls out and he throws the ball about 70 yards in the air, but he's not under any pressure. And when you put him under pressure, he just doesn't know how to deal with it. He is not good enough to be in the league. It's as simple as that. And the Jets brought in Trevor Siemian today. Now, there are some Broncos fans who back in the day in 2016, 2017 would have had you believe, if only Trevor Siemian had weapons around him, he could be a good QB. No, he's not the answer. They should be picking up the phone, I believe, to see if the Vikings will be willing to part with Kirk Cousins, because it's going to be a lost season for the Vikings. The window to win in a Super Bowl, to truly win one in the NFL, is so small. And for the Jets, like Kirk Cousins, you'd have to get him to waive the trade clause, but ultimately you'd be putting it together for a loan. If Aaron Rodgers was to come back, Kirk can walk away at the end of the year. I just don't see how you run this back. How do you keep everyone on board? You pointed out this is the second week in a row that we've seen players arguing on the sidelines. They kind of tried to keep him upright, when he first came in, but remember back, like there was almost open warfare amongst the defense and the offense last year.
Yeah, I mean, you rumored this column before it even was a rumor. I'm interested in your thoughts on this, Brian, that Cousins might be the option if the Viking season started to slide. I mean, I find it's a very attractive and intriguing proposition, and you could see how it might work. But this is not fantasy football, and in real life, you'd firstly have to convince Cousins that it's the right move. And they're 0-3, but they haven't played a divisional game yet. They've lost 3 one-score games. The Vikings don't look hopeless by any means. You'd be dropping them into the AFC East, where they've somehow got to find a way to gun down either the Dolphins or the Bills and amass enough wins to get a wild card spot, because that's realistically the best they can hope from that position. And it's not the easiest thing in the world to slot in somebody who's had no preseason with the team, who'd have to get used to a new roster. But all of that said, you'd kind of feel like anything's better than Zach Wilson.
The Vikings play the Panthers this weekend. You would expect them potentially to win that game and go 1-3, and then not sure what he play the week after. But season's not all lost for the Vikings. It doesn't make any sense for me for this trade to happen, despite the scenario in which the team is in. Because where's the picks? Like, their second round pick is gone. It's gone to Green Bay. They would have to be giving up picks for next year, the year after, realistically, to get a deal done. Like, the Vikings would be mad to turn anything down. But I just don't see how it happens. Once if he comes in, he runs the table, and he's the quarterback that they needed to get this team into the playoffs, and they go deep into the playoffs, and they say, do you know what, Kirk Cousins is the right man for us. Where does that leave Aaron Rodgers next offseason? It doesn't make any sense. Once if he runs...
Another darkness retreats, clearly.
The 49ers once had Joe Montana and Steve Young. Give yourself a lovely problem to have. I'm not saying it's easy. I don't even think it might happen. But if you're the Jets, what are you going to do? Run it back the exact same as last year? And where does that leave anyone? Like, how do you as an organization, how do you as a player have any faith in Salah and the rest of the organization if this is it? We're going to run it with Zach Wilson. I'm going to waste another year of my career. The Broncos and the Jets are the same franchise. They've done the same stupid stuff for the last 6 years, and none of it's worked. There's a reason they're the 2 lowest scorers in the league. It's absolute insanity. It goes nowhere. It's the merry-go-round to absolute hell. And the Jets tried to get off it. The Broncos tried to get off it. For some reason, there's some higher power that won't allow them to. But if you're the Jets, to me, you've got a talented roster, and you're absolutely going to waste it with Zach Wilson. We know he's not good enough. Everybody sees it. Like, how does Robert Saleh keep a straight face and go to the podium and say, Zach Wilson gives us the best opportunity to win? You're lying. And everybody knows. Like, if you go in and your boss lies to your face tomorrow, are you going to respect them? No, you're not. It's the same for players.
I'm not dismissing that. There's no way Zach Wilson is going to be the continued quarterback there. Unfortunately, the reality is Trevor Siemian will be playing. I'd imagine he'd be playing within 2 to 3 weeks. He's serviceable, is the word I maybe use. He probably isn't serviceable, but he did win a few games for the Saints last year. He managed to navigate a couple of victories when they were in a bit of a quandary about their quarterback. Maybe the theory the Broncos fans had a couple of years ago will come to fruition, and with better players there, he can manage an offense better. He certainly can manage an offense better than what we're seeing at the moment. I just don't see... I think there must be another scenario out there, a lesser quarterback than Kirk Cousins, who they could get and still galvanize the team and put them in a position to go to the playoffs. But the schedule is not going to help either. We spoke about this. Chiefs this week. The following week, it's God, it escapes me. We spoke about it previously. But they've got the Chiefs, they've got the Eagles. Sorry, they got the Broncos in between that, and then they go to their bye week. So it's not fruitful. It's not looking good. But I certainly don't think... I'm not dismissing. I agree with you, Colin. It won't be Zach Wilson. It will be Trevor Siemian. I don't see a trade taking place.
Right, I'll tell you, a team who doesn't have any quarterback problems is the Chargers. They just have the typical Charger problems, and yet somehow they managed to get away with it against the Vikings at the weekend, Colin. This was a crazy game. We called it out as a likely shootout because that seems to be all the Chargers dealing these days. Their offense is humming, and sometimes that gets overlooked with the dysfunction around play calling and game management that follows Brandon Staley. But until the last sort of 10 minutes of the game when everything went crazy, at least on the offensive side of the ball, you can see the difference that Kellen Moore makes. Herbert was out of his mind. He completed over 80% of the 45 passes that he threw. That's never been done in the NFL before. he just looked like he could make anything happen. And, you know, let's not forget about the one terrible pick that he nearly threw that bounced into the receiver's hand, quite luckily, that helped keep them in the game. But there's a lot going right there, and yet there's so much to pick apart in terms of what goes wrong.
You got to go back over a decade for a Taylor Swift song on this, but in 2012 she had I Almost Do, and that's it with both of these two teams. I've just compared the Broncos and the Jets and their years of ineptitude in the wilderness. Well, you could try the Chargers and the Vikings together, because they're both absolutely bizarre games. I mean, this was through the looking glass at the end, and ultimately, the Chargers get it done. But you look at it, and you've pointed it out, like Herbert. You look at Herbert's stats, and you go, how did they just get away with this? I mean, it's incredible, like, you know. And I also saw Kirk Cousins stats. Like, Kirk Cousins is on pace currently. Obviously, it will slow down for more than 6,000 yards, 51 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, and ultimately, even if he was to achieve that, how many wins would the Vikings end up with? For the Chargers, losing Mike Williams is, it's unfortunate. It'll mean that there's even more pressure on Keenan Allen. He was brilliant in this. He was, but teams are going to be able to double cover him.
Went for over 100 yards and threw a touchdown pass. Only one other man's ever done that in NFL history.
Yeah, no, I mean. And in terms of statistical outliers, I think Rice, more than anybody else, is head and shoulders above everybody. But let's go to Brian for his take on
the weekly Brandon Staley update.
Yes, I think we should go to him for that.
And let me tee you up, Brian, because there's an absolute beauty in this game for anyone who didn't see it over the weekend. Chargers get a great red zone stop, turnover on downs. They stop the Vikings scoring. They're 4 points up. They get out of their own end zone with a beautiful throw from Herbert. They somehow manage to engineer through 2 dumb running plays to find themselves in 3rd and long. Herbert still manages the completion to get them to 4th and 1. And what does Brandon Staley do from here?
Herbert had 7 incomplete passes in the game. 7. They couldn't stop him all day long. So you decide on 4th down, I'm going to get the 1st down here to win this game and effectively put this one to bed. So I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll take my win percentage at 78% and I'll reduce it down to 42% by calling a run play in a game that, despite all the great numbers, they couldn't run the ball all day long. But this head coach who loves all the stats. So let's look at the stats. Your quarterback statistically is having a lights out day. You want to go for a 4th down on the 20-yard line? Give it to your quarterback who's only had 7 incomplete passes. No. I'll call a run play. They lost that game against the Broncos when they played Mike Williams and he got injured. They had a disaster in Jacksonville. He had a disaster in week 1 when they should have won that game. He had a disaster last week. And if he doesn't get that 1st down, he didn't get the 1st down. If he doesn't get the win, he's gone. He'd have to be gone, because that would have been 6 games in a row where he's done a 50 burgers, we're calling it at the moment. But he got away with it because the Vikings had 7 turnovers. Sorry, the Vikings have had 7 red zone turnovers this season. And the play calling, if we're going to give abuse, we've got to give it to Kevin O'Connell as well, because there was a 25-second run off, I think, on the clock where they should have spiked the ball. And they got away with it as well because there was a hold called on the Chargers defense, which then gave them a brand new set of downs, and they still couldn't punch it in. They did what the Chargers have been doing and finding ways to lose games, like turnover after turnover. Red zone turnovers in particular are killing them when they should be going on and winning these games.
Yeah, I found myself doing the Manning cast thing, and I'm sure everybody watching the game was doing the same thing. Clock it. Spike the ball. They ran off 23 seconds, and then a stupid play. Like, all you got to do is clock it, dial up your best red zone play, and give yourself the best chance to win.
He didn't seem to have any plays as well, Connor. Some of the plays he went for were the same kind of call plays. They were so similar. Eerie watching it. They were essentially the same thing. And they had an incomplete pass as well, which kind of allowed them to stop the clock. You called it out on the group on Sunday night. Why were we taking 25 seconds off the clock? It sounds like you were on the sideline talking to the head coach, but you're right. Like it's bizarre. Like, the Chargers have got away with it, and the Chargers now probably win at the weekend against the Raiders. They'll be 2-2, and everybody will be wondering what the problem is. And Owen Healy, who's watching tonight, will be knocking down my door again, asking me why I continuously give this team loads. There we go, loads of abuse. But look, I just can't get it, and I genuinely can't believe any Chargers fan in the right mind would want him staying on as their head coach if they had to throw away that game, because they were so dominant.
Before we move off this game, the Vikings now 0-3 in one-score games. They went 11-0 last season. The regression very much real. It turns out the statistics people know what they're talking about. They've regressed to the mean, unfortunately. One-score games tend to be 50-50. The Vikings can't buy a win in one so far this season.
Yeah, it's an interesting, I suppose, one for them, right? Because they were. The pass game is so good. Like I saw again a couple of kind of stats earlier, like in terms of explosiveness, in terms of efficiency, they're second only behind the Dolphins. But again, the issue is the rest of it. I do think if anyone was watching, the collective intake of breath when Justin Jefferson went down was quite startling, because it was the entire stadium, and I think most people watching, talked about on this show before, you don't want to see players go down in any way, shape or form, and he is just so good, but it will be interesting to see if their luck changes at any point. But because another thing, I saw Sam Monson had a piece, I think, around kind of the turnover-worthy plays and turnovers, and Kirk Cousins was leading that. Kirk has only had 2 turnover-worthy plays, and yet he's had 5 turnovers himself. So yeah, everything's going against the Vikings.
We talked about this in the offseason as well. Like, Justin Jefferson has got to be worth at least 5 fewer picks for Kirk Cousins over the course of the season, because balls just get thrown up there that no other receiver is reeling in. He's just unbelievable. Like, he 2 or 3 of them at the weekend that you're going, oh, don't put it there, but he still manages to lay hands on it and pull it in. He's just unbelievable. Brian, not so unbelievable this season, Joe Burrow. Bengals got over the line in Monday Night Football, the Easter Rising result, a 1916 win for them, but it wasn't convincing, and he's not fooling anybody saying that this injury is not as bad as we have been talking about it being for the last couple of weeks. He looked very restricted. Jamar Chase saying before the game he was uneasy about even seeing Burrow play. Burrow said he came through it, quote unquote, unscathed. It might not have gotten any worse, but it's not getting any better, and you do worry for them if this continues.
Yeah, he was very off with a lot of passes throughout the course of the game. I think his wide receivers got him out of a number of holes on a few passes. He seemed to, I thought he got a little bit better as the game went on, but he's clearly uncomfortable. The first half, he couldn't do anything offensively. Their defense got them out of a hole last night in that game. Like, Hendrickson and Hubbard had some key sacks at very, at different times. Like, the Rams moved
Wilson,
the ball.
that Mike linebacker, was brilliant as well.
Yeah.
2 picks, I think he ended up with.
Yeah, he had 2 picks, yeah. And like, if the one in particular, the second one, was in a critical stage because the Rams were driving. They looked like they were just about on the periphery of the red zone. And obviously, it was the tip ball, they get the interception. And look, they navigated away with a strong defense to find a way to get past the Rams team, which are sturdy and have been quite a positive this season. This is probably where the Rams are at to play up against better teams and losing offensively unless they're putting up, getting the ball over the top. They couldn't really move it that well last night, and the Bengals defense was controlled for large parts. But Burrow, this thing is not going to go away. Unfortunately, it's difficult when they're on the road this weekend in Tennessee, and like we spoke about last Thursday, Tennessee's flaws seem to be on the road. At home, they seem to be a much better team. Be interesting to see how fit he is. Bearing in mind what we saw a couple of years ago in that championship game when he was, divisional round where he was sacked 13 times. They got over the line. They needed that win badly. We thought they'd be going against a team, the Ravens, would be 3-0. They pulled one back. They're only 1 game back now within the division. But it's a big concern, his injury, because without him, they're reliant on Mixon. They're reliant on players to take short ball passes, and it's not going to work in the long run.
Yeah, Colin, last night there was somebody who showed up whenever they needed it, whether that was defensively and that defense under Lou Anarumo, one of the more underrated units in the league. When they need to get something, they seem to always be able to deliver. Jamar Chase showed up in a big way. Joe Mixon busted off a couple of really big runs when they needed it, but it just doesn't look sustainable unless you get Burrow back fit. And we're all still wondering how a calf injury, and calf injuries, the calf strain is like an old man injury. It's not something you expect from someone in their mid-20s in their prime. You certainly don't expect it to take 6 weeks of rest and rehab and not be right. You said it, and Brian has said it, and I've said it since it happened. This looks a lot more serious than anyone else is letting on, and they can't do what they're expected to do unless it gets better.
On her 2017 album Reputation, Taylor Swift sang, "Look what you made me do," and look what the Bengals made Joe Burrow do. I wonder if the Ravens had got the win, would it have been the same, or did the fact that they lost mean that there was even more incentive for him to go out? Because as Brian said, they're a game back now. There are lots of times where Aaron Rodgers annoys me. There are lots of times when I find him to be pontificating when he goes on to the Pat McAfee show. The just before the Lions last season being probably the ultimate example of that. But he went on today and he talked, right, I think, rightly, because he's one of the greatest QBs to play the game. But he talked about kind of playing through injury, and that sometimes you have to do that. And we've seen, I suppose, the really, really talented, the best in any sport go out, right, when they are hurt and do it. And that's what Joe Burrow did. And was he good? No. And are there concerns for the rest of the season? Yeah. But the Bengals, they got the win. And ultimately in, a season where I suppose it isn't baseball, it isn't basketball. When you drop games, you are in trouble. They did enough. And to me, it showed the resilience of this team. And that's what we've seen from them over the past few years. That's ultimately what got them to the Super Bowl. It was enough for last night. How much, will it continue to be? I don't know. But you rightly, Connor, pointed that it wasn't just Burrow, it's like everyone around him stepped up, and that's what they needed, and they will need that to continue. The defense is going to have to carry this team a little bit. Jamar is going to have to do even more than he usually does, because Joe Burrow is not the Joe Burrow we know, and we don't know how long it'll take. It could be December. If he is to be right before we really see Joe Burrow at this point. We just don't know.
Brian, a word on the Rams. Let's not overlook their contribution to that game. They're hanging around. They're winning games. They're hanging into games. They got in Puka Nacua week in, week out, someone who looks like a legitimate threat, and could be in the conversation for rookie of the year, offensive rookie of the year from the 5th round. They're well coached. Stafford looks like approaching something approaching his best, and they're going to cause difficulty. They're not closing the door on the NFC West conversation.
No, absolutely not. And Sean McVay looks like a re-energized coach. There's one camera footage of him last night after that particular interception, which we spoke, where he was banging his head against his playbook, and he looked like a coach that was really engrossed and back, kind of where we saw him a couple of years ago, and really wanting this team to go in the right direction, bearing in mind how poor they were last year. Yeah, they're playing really well. I still think they're a bit light. I think when they go up against stronger teams like we saw last night, like if Burrow was at the level we've seen last season, like would that game been as close as it possibly was? Like it was a garbage time touchdown in many ways. So they really, they found a way to navigate a 10-point type of victory. We saw it last week. They play tough, they'll hang in games, but I think over the course of the season they'll win a few games. They'll be commendable in many, but I still don't think they've enough to win a lot of games. But it is a lot more promising, especially with the younger slate of players they have there than I talk going into the season.
All right, well, we'll get to their week 4 games, and indeed all the week 4 games when we regroup on Thursday. That's it for our week 3 talking points. We're on to week 4, and we will see you on Thursday.